Captain Midnight.
This video is brought to you by Brilliant. So, after checking in with the MCU last week, I actually decided that I felt like returning to the world of The Boys. I had a really good time talking about it, but really, my last video on the show was mostly confined to discussing Jensen Ackles' Soldier Boy. So instead of doing a what I'd like to see next in the MCU type video, like I usually do after a Marvel movie, I decided that doing one for The Boys might be more interesting. A few things before I start though. One, and I hope this goes without saying, this will feature spoilers for The Boys up to the end of Season 3. I'm also going to be kind of taking the comic out of the equation here just because of how different it and the show have become. So instead of referring back to it, I'm mostly just going to be using the show itself as a reference point. I think they've diverged enough that you can easily talk about one without the other. So with all that out of the way, let's talk about a few things I'd really like to see in The Boys Season 4.
So when someone offers you drugs, you tell them Soldier Boy said taking drugs is not cool, and anyone who does is a loser.
So I've really been enjoying this final season of Better Call Saul, for a ton of reasons, but one of them is the great work that Giancarlo Esposito is doing as Gustavo Fring, who has recently got to showcase his range a bit more in episodes that give us a closer look at the day-to-day life of the drug kingpin / fast food magnate. I've been really happy to see that because ever since Breaking Bad hit big for him, I feel like a lot of the actors' roles have started to become pretty similar. Menacing, evil bosses like his role in Far Cry 6 or The Mandalorian. At first glance, that fits the bill for Stan Edgar as well, Vought's now former CEO. I have nothing against the character, I actually think he's really promising, but there's no question that his role has been kind of limited. Season 3 took some smart steps to change that, with Victoria Newman revealed as not only someone he works with, but basically his adopted daughter as well. She of course turned against him, as Vought did as a whole, so where we left him at the end of the season I think is actually a lot more interesting. After decades of devoting his life to Vought's mission, and climbing that no doubt very treacherous ladder, Edgar now finds himself a disgraced former executive with no clear path forward. Of course, what little we know about Stan suggests that he's someone who plans for setbacks, and I'm really interested to see what he decides to do. The most obvious route for him also might make for the best TV. The idea of him teaming up with the boys in some capacity in Season 4. Now, that may seem a little predictable, but honestly, I just think it would be worth it. I would love to see Stan Edgar finally interacting with that whole part of the cast, and watching him continue to go head to head with Butcher just sounds like something we absolutely need to see. The fact that both Butcher and Edgar would happily stab each other in the back would also make a tenuous alliance like that pretty interesting. At the end of the day though, I just think Stan Edgar is a character that deserves more screen time, and with Better Call Saul wrapping up, I really hope that Season 4 brings just that. There's also some other things that are definitely worth mentioning, like Soldier Boy's very abrupt decommissioning at the end of the season. It did feel a little rushed, but more than that, I'm just gonna miss the character. Jensen Ackles made a huge impact with the relatively little screen time that he had last year. And unless for some reason he's unavailable for Season 4, I think he definitely should return. For one thing, I'd really like to see him interact more with the Seven. Like Soldier Boy and the Deep having a storyline together just seems like such a great potential comedic fit, and I hope they don't keep him on ice for too long. And of course, when you're talking about the boys, it won't be long until you're talking about Homelander. I've heard from a lot of people that they found the finale of Season 3, specifically the big battle at Vought headquarters, frustrating because it didn't do all that much to change the status quo. And I totally understand where those people are coming from. I get that Butcher cares for Ryan, but considering just how much time he poured into killing Homelander once and for all, and how much he was willing to lose to accomplish that goal, it did feel like a bit of a cop-out for him to flip on Soldier Boy so quickly. When all was said and done, I did think it was a little sloppy. But what we have now, leading into Season 4, also seems pretty filled with possibilities. Sure, there's the very obvious thing of Ryan looking full Damien from The Omen at the end of the finale, but honestly, that's not the Homelander-involved plotline that I'm most interested in. Instead, it's the fact that Vought ally Victoria Newman seems to be a lock for vice president. I'm guessing that Jim Beaver as Robert Singer isn't a character that's going to be around for long. He wasn't given much of a personality last season, and while I like Beaver as an actor, even this character's name is just a very direct reference to his supernatural character, Bobby Singer. And beyond that winky reference, I don't think there's all that much to him. If Homelander and Vought took care of him and installed Victoria as president, that gives Homelander even more power than he had previously. Not that I think Victoria would be a pushover either. I think, like Stan, she'll find a way to balance his ego and neediness and use that to her own ends. But still, that only goes so far. Homelander as the leader of Vought and the government would put the boys at a bigger disadvantage than ever, and I'm interested to see exactly what Victoria and Homelander would actually want to do in office. I'm also curious what that means for Annie now that she's completely rejected her old soup identity as Starlight. She made some incredibly risky and bold moves in Season 3, and I think we have yet to really see all the consequences of that. As Homelander told her, it's really just her fame protecting her at this point. So my guess is that Vought will do their best to completely discredit her and take her out of the public eye. In many ways, her and Huey have never been in a more precarious situation, especially since Victoria knows them both very, very well. Oh, and going back to Homelander, I want to make a prediction here that could be totally and completely off base, and it's something that a lot of people thought would happen last season. I believe Season 4 will culminate in Homelander losing his powers. I mean, the story mechanics for how that can happen is definitely right there with Soldier Boy, but more importantly, I think it would just make really compelling television. If the majority of Season 4 shows us Homelander at his most ascendant, with the most power he's ever had, and his approving son at his side, I think it only makes sense that all of that would come crumbling down by the season's end. I think a depowered Homelander offers a lot of character possibilities as well. He's clearly raising Ryan to respect brute violence and power above all else, but what happens when he no longer possesses that? Characters like the Deep and Ashley live in debilitating fear of Homelander. It is what keeps them in line. Take away that fear, and how would they react to him? Who would fill that power vacuum he left? Possibly Victoria, or maybe even Stan Edgar plotting his resurgence. Like I said, I think there's just a lot of story potential to be found there. Even though I could also see the show maybe not wanting to change their iconic character too much. Honestly though, I think they should just go for it. Seeing Homelander have to adjust to not being the most powerful being in every room he's in would be pretty great. I've loved Starr's performance from the start, and I think this would only give him a fresh and interesting angle to explore. Who is Homelander without the powers? I think that's a question worth answering. Then there's the members of the boys themselves, who have definitely had it with Butcher treating them like the hired help. I am really curious to see what they give Butcher this season though. The fact that he failed so completely in the finale makes me think that Season 4 will have to see him redefining himself, and especially what he wants. Hopefully that means more scenes with his dad, played by John Noble. I thought his backstory stuff was handled pretty well last season, and with that added context, I really want to see what else Noble, who is just so great in Return of the King and Fringe, will bring to the table. Overall, I think The Boys is in a really good place heading into Season 4. While I understand why some felt let down by the finale, I do think where we left off sets up another season very well. I'm sure it'll be a long wait, like it usually is with streaming shows, but hopefully Season 4 will be worth it, and maybe even be more okay with upsetting the show status quo than Season 3 was. Alright, so I had a whole little transition here comparing learning to superpowers, but considering the show, maybe I'll steer clear of the evils of Compound V and just thank today's great sponsor, Brilliant. Brilliant is dedicated to being the interactive learning platform that fits into your schedule, whatever it may look like. They help you tackle new science, math, and computer science concepts in an actually enjoyable and very hands-on way. I've mentioned their everyday math topic before, and for good reason. Instead of trapping me into one strict way of learning, everyday math helped give me the tools I needed to confidently tackle an area of learning that I've often struggled with. It gives you a fresh start, focusing on the foundations of math and building your knowledge from the ground up. Because what Brilliant is really great at is giving you the tools you need to tackle these STEM topics you might find intimidating head on. So go to brilliant.org/midnight and try it for free. And the first 200 people to go to that link in the description will get 20% off the annual premium subscription.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes, too.